All right, I hear in the distance woogie music. The kind that makes me feel good. That we had blues music in Washington just last week. Yes, indeed. Oh, now it's time to hear the guitar. Oh yeah. All right. Over the hills and far away. I say this now, for the music to fade away. Fade, fade, fade. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Watchwell is my name, and natural philosophy is my game. And our studio is now different. We are doing our filming, and we do this in the lower quarters of City Hall. And now they're changing our studio, and they took out the panels on the ceiling, and now it's like, hey, how you doing up there? Hey, hey, hey. It's more echoey. So it sounds different as I talk. So it sounds only different to me, and hopefully it'll sound the same for you. Okay, so let's go. Watchwell is my name. Natural philosophy is my game. And again, I was saying in the last adventure of the Philip Watchwell program that school will soon be beginning. So we will get then into more strenuous material. But we're going to kind of cruise a little bit today. This program is being shot on the 27th of August, okay, as a point of reference. I hate to date them because sometimes they do get repeated. But nonetheless, it's on the 27th, so it'll give you some reference point. And I watched my own program from last time where I started talking about all the flow of the oil, because it was a rather interesting story that there was a pipeline in Iraq that got blown up, and then they were talking about getting it repaired. And there were like all kinds of numbers that kind of went with it. And I started watching and I didn't really get it out. So I'm going to start kind of completely over, and I'm going to recall this segment Fill Her Up, because this what it's really about is filling. It's really about filling up the ships with oil. They get filled with oil, they go to the refineries, and they get back to us. And I have a lot of numbers to go with it, so it gets a little messy, but I'm going to try to start the whole thing again. And then after we get that done, then we're going to have the Where Are We segment, which I didn't get in last time. They're telling me where to look here. And then if we have some time left over, I have some pretty cool pictures of some bridges around the world, like Golden Gate Bridge and a few others. So there's always some things to talk about. Let me just quickly say that we'll have our P.O. Box on the screen and the program times. And again, we thank you always for watching. And like I said, it's been kind of hard in the summertime because I still have young kids and they kind of drive me crazy. And so I don't really get all of this stuff prepared, but I will, when school starts, I'm going to kind of pick up the pace. And so hopefully we'll get into some little nicer material. But today we'll kind of keep it light. But I do want to finish this one program today, and it's about, I'm going to call it Fill Her Up. And it's called Filling Up the Ships of Oil, and the ships to come back to make it possible for us to drive our SUVs. And I do have a little commentary that goes with that. But there are a lot of numbers, so try to stick with me. Boy, as I'm talking here, really it's funny. I'm hearing all this big echo because we had suspended ceiling, and now there's like kind of bouncing around here. So it's a little crazy. But whatever. So let's just jump in here. So we'll save our stuff here, our star charts and our thing for the Where Are We segment. And it's interesting now because, as I said, the 27th, in actually less than 1 month, we will be into autumn. So it will be kind of crazy. So let me jump in kind of like where we were last time, and we will get all over again. We will start again. So what I was talking about, again, and the reason why I'm calling this particular, I'm going to call this particular segment, let's just kind of start from the beginning. From the beginning, right? Isn't that where Genesis starts, from the beginning? We're going to call this segment Fill Her Up. Okay? And what I mean by fill her up, when I'm saying, hey, fill her up, is like not like you go to the gasoline station where you go and get, your 15 or 20 gallons, for your Jeep or your SUV or your private car. What I'm going to talk about is the kind of like the logistics involved in fill her up, meaning like the big tanker ships that go from Iraq and then they come all the way back, to like California or Louisiana, and then they refine the oil into any number of products, diesel fuel, mostly gasoline, some motor oil, and some other things, and that gets used up. But like I said, I'm kind of going to redo the last show. And what this show was about, it was talking about that there was, they were talking about that in Iraq that there were several of the pipelines that were damaged, and that they said that they got them flowing again. And again, there's a lot of numbers that goes with this, so I'm just going to try to redo that segment. And so what the segment was, they said there were two pipelines. One was like 42 inches, 107 centimeters, which equates to 42 inches, and I started running that calculation. And then there was a second one, I believe that was like a little bit better. I think it was like 120 centimeters, and then that ended up being like 46 inches. And the curious question is that they said, okay, it all started that they said, well, they had these two pipelines. One was damaged, and one was damaged and one was not. And of course, remember the whole gouge is going on. Well, the oil is up to like, $48 a barrel because they're worried about, the oil is not going to flow, and so on and so forth. So they were talking about in Iraq, these two big pipelines. And again, you see the pictures, what these big pipelines look like, like you've seen, everyone's seen pictures of the Alaskan pipeline where you have these big pipes, and they're like huge, like I said, it's 46 inches in diameter of these big pipes. So like a big pipe, and it comes from the field and it flows across the countryside, and then they have like wherever it's going on hills, and they build little brackets and everything. It looks like a big snake, way back here is like where they pump it out. And then it flows, and then out this end it flows like out at the dock. They said that this one actually flows underwater, and the ships are actually, it said that the ships are like actually, I think they said 800 feet off the water every day. They weren't even on the land. They were quite a bit away from the actual line. But the key part about it is that they said the number that stuck in my mind as I was reading this article. See, when Watchwell looks at an article, he reads it, and all of a sudden he sees the numbers and he deciphers it in his own little way. And so the key factor is, it said it was 700,000 barrels of oil per day, okay? That is a lot of black gold. So 700,000 barrels a day, and then there were two lines, and then one was damaged, and then they repaired it, and then they were getting them both fixed up again. But now, I once did a long time ago, when the man who plays Watchwell was living in California, and I actually did some work for some oil projects in the North Sea. So I got to learn a little bit of the logistics of how all that system works, and so I'm going to try to explain some of that stuff to you. So I'll share some of the knowledge. Because again, if you're just an American consumer, all you do is you just hear something on the radio, well, the price of oil is going up, or, somebody tells you that gas is going up, and you have no recourse but to grumble and groan and pay your $2 a gallon. But I can give you a little bit of insight because I know how some of that logistics works. So here is the rather interesting part. 700,000 barrels per day is interesting because the reason why I call it fill her up, okay, hey, fill her up, is that these big tanker ships coincidentally, big tanker ships carry about between, depending on the size, between 700 and 750,000 barrels of oil. So the big tankers, come in, you've seen pictures of them, they come in and they chug up to the thing, and then they basically come and then they park their big ship, okay? So again, it's about between 700,000, 750,000. And then they park their big ship, and just like when you pull into the gas station, you with your little putt-putt SUV, you pull into the gas station and you stick in the little hose. And of course, for you in your little personal car, you're only sitting there, for maybe, maybe 2 minutes at the most, to fill up your little car. So you take this whole concept here and you blow it up, you magnify it over and over and over, and it turns out that the big ship, the big tanker ships that park in there, they kind of look like this, and they just here, and then it's just oil, 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 oil. They come in here and they have this big, huge system, and it takes about 24 hours to fill the ship, right? Like I said, okay, it takes, the flow from the pipeline is approximately 700,000 barrels per day, and one day, of course, is 24 hours. Hence, it takes approximately 24 hours to fill the ship. So then the ship is sitting there, and then meanwhile, they come here, and of course, they don't do anything. They just get the ship in place, and then they hook up the big hose, the big 42-inch diameter hose, or maybe they have a couple of them that feed off, and it just fills like one big giant gas. They tell me we're looking like one big giant gas tank, you know, oil tank, and then of course when it's ultimately filled up, then it comes back to the United States or maybe to Europe and refines the oil. But anyways, but keep that part in mind first. Okay, think of like the oil ship like a big giant car that gets its fill, just like you go to the gasoline station and you get your fill, except it's, you know, way exaggerated because it's about 700,000 barrels per day. Now, what I want to do now is I want to break that down a little bit more because I want to talk about this little, this relates to, why I left this on the board, the QAV, and what that means. Okay, so keep that in mind, 700,000 barrels per day, and you now have a big ship full of oil. But then, of course, we talk a little bit about how it flows into it. So now here's the curious question, what a lot of people probably don't know, or it's not real. Okay, you're looking over here. Hi there, how you doing? It's not real common knowledge of how many gallons are in a barrel, so you have to do some figuring here, and I'll try to show you how to do that real quick. It turns out that one barrel of the black gold equals approximately 42 gallons. 42 gallons, okay? And I'm just going to go through some of the units here, just so you can kind of break this down. So one barrel is approximately 42 gallons. Now, granted, crude, you know, is kind of thicker, and it's not exactly, it doesn't exactly equate to, you know, that 42 gallons of crude oil are going to equate exactly to 42 gallons of gasoline. It'll be certainly some percentage less. But just that you get some idea where you can relate from barrels to gallons. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go quickly backwards, and we're going to get the area parts calculated for this thing, and then we're going to go with this flow here, and then we're going to kind of come up with some concept of how fast all this massive oil is flowing through these pipelines to fill a whole big ship with 700,000 barrels of oil in 24 hours. So let's kind of keep on breaking it down here. I wrote some notes here. I hope I don't get too lost in my notes. So you now know, I'm telling you now that one barrel is now 42. So then you can take that, you know, that 700,000 and then multiply times 42, and then that tells you approximately how many gallons it flows in a day. Well, let's do our area first. So the very first thing we said, starting this conversation, is again that we have the big pipeline that's 46 inches, just like when you go to the gas station. You know, the thing that goes in your car is, I don't know, about maybe an inch and a half, right? The small little nozzle that's full size that goes in your gas tank, and then the thing that goes in, that the oil comes out, is a big 120 centimeters or approximately 42 inches. So if you calculate this out here, okay, let's get our area out of the way. If you get our area using our area formula for pi over 4 times d squared, okay, now you should be able to do this. It turns out if you crank this through and you do the proper conversion, it ends up that the area, the big cross-sectional area of the big pipeline, is approximately 12.17 feet squared, okay? So just remember that, okay? So that's where this came from. Because ultimately what we want to do is we want to get some kind of concept of flow and velocity of this big pipe. And again, so you know why Americans consume so much. Now, so what we're saying is we got to go from barrels to gallons. There's a lot of units here. So ultimately we want to go from barrels today to barrels per hour, barrels per minute. And then it turns out that if we convert it, if we do all our unit changes, blah, 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 it gets a little kind of confusing. It ends up that this big pipeline filling the ship is pumping 486 barrels per minute, okay? And those number will go with that big number, 700,000 barrels per day. So now we've got it broken down into something a little bit more. So now 486 barrels per minute, if you do all the continued conversion, ends up being 20,000, I did these conversions, 20,416 gallons per minute, okay? And of course, and then that was another conversion. I'm not going to plague you with all of that, but it was just a lot of conversions. Again, I always just talk about my units. Okay, I'm going to start watching my timer. Okay, we're doing pretty good. So if you do all of this, I'm not going to keep on relentlessly writing the numbers, but just know that you break it down. If it's barrels times 42 barrels per gallon, a gallon, and so on and so forth. So you do this, so now you kind of get the idea how massive this is. So now we're looking at 20,416 gallons of crude oil per minute. Now there's one more piece to the puzzle. If you convert, because you know that 1 gallon equals 231 inches cubed in volume, and then if you divide that by 1728, which is the number of cubic inches per 1 foot cubed, again, this is starting to get a little hairy here, kids, but stick with me. Then you can get out what that, you find out that 0.1336 feet cubes is the cubic flow for a gallon. And then again, then you multiply that. Again, this is more for the advanced kids here. Now, I'm not kind of pandering to those who don't want to think so much. So then you crank that out, and then if you use that particular conversion, you ultimately get into the final number here. Well, I'm going to get back to this flow equation, is 2727.66 feet cubed. Again, now I'm trying to get away from gallons, I'm trying to get away from barrels, and I'm just trying to get into flow of the crude oil. Is 2,000, let's see if my numbers are good here, 2,727.66 cubic feet of crude oil per minute, okay? Now that's starting to get into like a lot of volume. Okay, now that we finally have that, we can get back to a formula, because we said over here that we had the area of this big massive pipe that's carrying this crude oil for us was 12.17 feet squared, okay? And then we are now saying that, this is per minute, and now we're now saying that the mass, the mass flow is 2,727.66 cubic feet per minute. We now have units that we can put together where if we use our Q equal to AV, then we do have consistent units, because we ultimately want to end up with feet cubed per minute, and then we have equals unit check feet squared, and then feet squared, and then we end up with feet, velocity is in feet per, well, we'll just say feet per minute instead of feet per second. So then we have consistent units, see, because feet squared times feet is feet to the third power, and then minute. So we have consistent units. And then the last piece to the puzzle here is that what I did is I figured it out, that you have this whole big massive thing. You can now take this 12 feet and divide it into here, and then you actually can figure out the velocity of this big massive thing. The velocity just means how fast this crude oil is flowing through the pipe. And then I came up with the number 3.73 feet per second of all this thing. Now, the ultimate question, of course, becomes, what does that ultimately mean? You know, what does it ultimately mean? Okay, and what it ultimately means is that if you have this big pipe, where all this oil is flowing through from the Iraqi fields to the ships, is a way to visualize it is the following. Again, it gets so kinky that it's just hard to visualize. What it really is telling you is like you've got this volume, this big like volume of like oil, like well, in this case it's oil, but of course it could be water in your house or something, is that if for some reason there was like a switch, this is like 60 seconds, if there was like somehow a switch where there was like as the oil was flowing this big pipe, somehow if there was like some kind of I don't know what, a big blade or something where you could just, have the oil sitting here and then all of a sudden like just pull it out instantaneously, what it would mean is that all the oil that's starting here, this big volume of oil here, would flow 224.13 feet of oil out here. So I mean, it's just overwhelming to think in terms of how much it really is, because it's like just like I said, it's like 200 and like I said 224.13 feet per minute. But the ultimate thing was what I said is that the ultimate flow was, the volume was 2,727.6 cubic feet per minute. Just gushes. So now that I've kind of made you sick by talking about all this oil, now we can kind of maybe spend a half a minute with a little social commentary. So the question becomes, well, here's all these American people who have this unbelievable thirst for all this oil, where these people go around the world and they destroy countries and destroy governments where they can get their hands on these tremendous reserves of oil, because the demand is that they want people like the United States are consuming, 1.5 million, 2 million barrels of oil per day. I mean, it's just overwhelming. So then the ultimate question becomes in the equation is, how is it that we will ever stop using all this oil? All they do is they keep on building more cars, and they keep on building more roads, and they keep on building more suburbs. And so the question is, where is the fork in the road? Even if we go with hydrogen fuel, everybody always keeps on talking like the big hydrogen fuel is going to save the day, but then it's still the same thing. Then we still have cars, and then we're still polluting with who knows what, the asphalt to build more roads, and rubber to build the tires. So it just goes on and on and on. And I don't have the answer. Maybe, I don't know, we've just gotta move to Tibet and just become yogas. I don't know. Anyway, that, I hope that didn't get too kinky for you. That was about my oil. I just ran some of those big numbers by you and just see, because people who are in that business, like these oil guys, that's their job, to figure out how to do this stuff, and they got to get the oil and dig it out and get it from the fields to the ships, and from the ships to the refineries, and from the refineries to the gas station, and then get in what they call the American grid, which is that there has to be fuel service every a minimum of 3 to 5 square miles. Okay, that's how it works. Even if you're going out in the middle of the desert, there's still theoretically supposed to be a gas station within so many miles. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, enough of the oil stuff. Well, I got that up. So that was the filler up segment. Now, I got just a little bit of a few minutes for the kind of like the Where Are We segment. You have to watch our time. Now, like I said, this program is being shot on the 27th. So what is that telling us? That's telling us, like I said, we didn't do the Where Are We next time. Now, again, I keep on talking about that at some point here. Can we get a close-up here, Andy? At some point here, I want to have, I keep on refining this, and at some point I want to make this little thing, this little gadget here available, because what Watchwell has been working on is I have this little thing that corresponds with all the stuff in the Fireman's Almanac, where in one little device here, little thing, you can look, the position of the sun, the position of the moon, the constellation that the moon's in, and the other various constellations, and so on and so forth. And to me, it makes perfect sense. But what I want, my ultimate goal, is to come up with some kind of little device that I can get into the hands of my watchwellites to go along with the Farmer's Almanac, so that all this data of the planets and the constellations and the moon positions and so on and so forth will make sense. But quickly, so to kind of talk where we are. So the where are we I'm talking about now is okay, 9/21 here is approximately, it's going to be a month off. So right now, like I said, we got like 6/21, 7/21, 8/21. So we are just a little bit past here. So here we are in terms of kind of like degrees. We are like less than, I don't know, about 15 degrees, you know, to the time that fall comes. And so that's what this little device here is all about, is I have this started where, as you know, the faithful Watchwellites who watch this show relentlessly know that the Watchwell year starts on like the first day of spring. And then how I envision things is from this spring, everything goes approximately 360 degrees, because it corresponds with the approximately 365 days per the annual cycle. So that's how, you know, the geometry of Watchwell works. You have to get into my mind. And so it goes like everyone, like, you know, 3/21, 4/21, 5/21, 6/21, 7/21, 8/21. And so it's broken down into those segments. So it comes out approximately 24, which is similar to a day. And how this corresponds is that on this particular day, it is telling me that if we think of the Earth in the center, that our sun is in kind of in the constellation of Leo, and that our moon is in Sagittarius, which indeed it is, if you look in the information in the Farmer's Almanac. And it all just makes like a lot of sense. And I have one more little piece to the puzzle. I'm just kind of waiting for my music. And I got one more little piece to the puzzle here. This one, I don't know if this corresponds. Here, Andy, if we can get a close-up of this. This is white, but this one is, I have a little thing on my computer where I have this thing where I update this little thing, and then it always corresponds. I always use the Farmer's Almanac as my guide. And if you can understand where you can look, kind of like have a two-dimensional picture that corresponds with all this data and really understand it, then you are ahead of the game. So that is all coming up. I think I'm going to wind down today. I actually have gotten my material out for a change. Oh, I hear my music in the background. Oh, good, I'm bailed out. All right, Watchwell is my name, and Natural Philosophy is my game. I got one last thing I'm going to sneak in here. I didn't get to my bridges, and that is, and you can get one last close-up if you go into a different part of the show. I have a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge looking down from the top. You can get that in there. It's not too bad. So we'll see you all later, alligator. The next time we do a Watchwell show, school will be back in session, so there's going to be a test. You better study hard. We'll see you later, alligator. Bye-bye.